Today we're going to be getting started with our first lesson in our Earth and the Universe unit. And for the first lesson we're going to be talking about the cycle of day and night. Now when we talk about the cycle of day and night, the first important vocabulary word that you need to understand is what a cycle is. And when we talk about a cycle, we're just talking about a process that repeats itself. Last year you learned about the life cycle of butterflies, for instance. That's a repeating process. The butterfly goes from the egg stage to the caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly, and then the butterfly lays eggs, and the cycle keeps repeating and keeps repeating. And the cycle of day and night is very similar in that it's this ongoing process that continues on a fixed period of time, and it just repeats over and over again. Now when we talk about this day and night cycle on Earth, this is a 24-hour recurring cycle, which means every 24 hours this cycle will repeat itself. Now we know on Earth that, as we go through our day, we see daylight for part of the day and we see that it's dark during night. But the reason that this happens is because Earth is constantly moving in space. We're not just sitting in one spot. The Earth is actually making a few different kinds of movement, and we'll be talking about another type of movement in the next lesson. But these movements that the Earth makes in space cause things like day and night, seasons, and some other things that we experience as well. Now the type of motion we're going to be talking about today that the Earth makes is what's called rotation. And rotation is just what happens when you're spinning in place on a fixed axis. If you've ever sat in one of those swivel chairs and you can just kind of spin the chair around and keep spinning and spinning, you're rotating on one point. You're rotating on the base of that chair. And that's essentially what happens to the Earth as it rotates. It rotates on what's called an axis. And this axis is just an imaginary line between the north and south pole of the Earth. And you can see in the illustration, the Earth is just spinning on this one point. That's rotation. And this rotation takes 24 hours for the Earth to make one complete spin around, or one complete rotation. Now the reason that this rotation causes the cycle of day and night is because of the sun. The sun is giving us light on Earth, but the sun can only light up the part of Earth that's facing it. And from the illustration you see here that the sun's kind of back in the background, but half of the Earth is lit up by the sun, and half of the Earth is facing away from the sun, meaning that it's going to be nighttime there. So always during the course of this 24-hour cycle, half of the Earth is facing the sun and half of the Earth is facing away from the sun. So half of the Earth will always have daylight and half of the Earth will always have night. It just depends on where on Earth you're at and what part of Earth's rotation we're currently in as to whether you'll have day and night at that point where you're at on Earth. Now we said that it takes Earth 24 hours to make one complete rotation, which means if you just kind of picked any point on Earth, the point that you're standing on right now, after 24 hours you would rotate all the way around the Earth's axis and you would end up back where you started in relation to the sun. That 24-hour rotation is the reason that we have 24-hour days, because in that 24-hour day the Earth's rotating once, we're having roughly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, depending on where specifically you are on Earth. That may change a little bit, and we'll talk about why that is in the next lesson. But roughly half the day is spent in daylight, half the day is spent at night. Over the next lessons that we do, we'll be looking at some other motions and movements that the Earth makes in space. It doesn't just sit in one place and rotate, it does some other things as well. But we'll be talking about that a little bit in the next lesson. For today, though, it is important to remember the Earth rotates or spins on its axis, that imaginary line between the North and South Pole, and that rotation is what causes this 24-hour cycle of day and night.